Hey everybody, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today on our 2021 Chevy Silverado 3500, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install the Air Lift LoadLifter 7500 XL air helper springs for the rear axle. So one thing that I like to do is take a couple of measurements and kind of get a baseline for our truck. That way we have something to compare it to once we get the airbags actually installed. You know, that way we can see if there's any difference made. So with that said, the first thing I'm gonna do is just take a measurement of the truck. That way we can kind of establish that factory ride height. So here at the front of the truck, we'll go from the ground to the edge of our wheel well. That's gonna be right at 41 inches. Here at the back of the truck, take that same measurement from the ground, edge of our wheel well there, and that's gonna be right at 41 3/4 of an inch. So I went ahead and put quite a bit of weight in the bed of the truck, and honestly I was pretty surprised. It really didn't affect it all that much. And I was actually talking to one of the other installers, and he had one of these high country 3500s not too long ago, and said he really loaded it down and really didn't do a whole lot, really didn't make the suspension squat a ton or anything. So that's all right, you know, we can still get some weight back there and get a feel for things. But with that said, we'll go ahead and take the measurement up here, and from the ground to the edge of the wheel well, looks like it's gonna be right at about 41 1/4 of an inch. And here at the back, yeah, do that same measurement. It's gonna be right at about 41 1/2 inches. So even with that little bit of weight back there, you know, it made the truck squat just a little bit, and the front end rise up some. With that said, you know, the more weight, all those effects are going to be amplified. So if you're pulling like a 15,000 pound trailer, really have a heavy load behind you, you know, those effects are going to be increased. So what can happen whenever the truck is squatting down, you know, for one, you're going to lose your comfort. It's just going to be, you know, your suspension's not going to have as much travel. It's going to work much harder, and that can potentially cause premature failure. You know, you're wearing things out a lot quicker. And not to mention, when the front end starts coming up like this, you're going to lose some of that braking performance that you're used to, as well as steering. And so overall, I mean, you know, you start putting a bunch of weight behind your truck, it just kind of affects it from front to back, and you can definitely feel it whenever you're driving. But with all that said, what we like to do is go out on our test course and kind of run it through a few tests and see how it handles. Once we're done with that, we'll get the airbags on and do it all again. So here in the truck, we'll get going here, and the first thing that we're gonna do is go over some bumps. And what I like to do is kind of get going over a few of them and really get some, you know, some energy going through our suspension. And honestly, it's not terrible. You can definitely feel the weight back there. So, you know, I can imagine if you had something really heavy, you're pulling a really big trailer, how the small effects I'm feeling now would translate into larger ones, you know. So if I feel this little bit of weight back here now, might not feel bad, but if we, you know, increase that weight tenfold, the effects would probably be increased about the same as well. So if you had a big old trailer on here, I think it would be much more noticeable, and probably would definitely leave some room for improvement. So now we can do some evasive maneuvering, and I'm just gonna pick up some speed here and start to do some sharp turns. And this is usually where I see the most room for improvement. And I do feel some of the effects of the weight for sure. You know, you get a little more body roll, and the truck is kind of just, it almost lags. You know, you almost have to put more effort into it to get it to level back out and straighten back out. So, like I said in the past, that's kind of where, you know, the airbags really make a big difference, and I think that's going to hold true with this setup as well. But we will get them on and find out. So now that we have our airbags installed, got that same amount of weight in the bed of the truck, again, let's go ahead, check our measurements, and see where our truck is sitting. So here at the front, ground, the edge, right at about 41, so essentially sitting at that factory level. And here at the back of our truck, looks like we're gonna be at actually about 43 1/4 of an inch. So it's actually sitting up a little bit higher back here. Not a big deal. We got probably 20 to 25 pounds of air in the bags. We'll let some air out till we get it at that factory ride height, and we'll be good to go. So we already ran our test driving around without the airbags installed. Now that we have them in, why don't we go ahead, hop back up in the truck, take it for a spin, and see if you notice any improvements. So again, run through our test course, and I'm curious to see what's gonna happen here, because this morning, when we ran through this, it really wasn't terrible. I think this truck is just so heavy duty, we really need a lot of weight. And actually it is better. It actually is better. Believe it or not, it almost feels a little bit smoother. A lot of times what can happen when you put an airbag on like this, it almost makes a truck super stiff. And it kind of did the opposite with this one actually. Just like we're going over the bumps a little bit smoother, and kind of just got like a big cushion there on our suspension. So definitely noticed a little improvement here. So now that we done hit the bumps, we'll do some evasive maneuvering again. And I actually felt that weight quite a bit this morning, so I'm anxious to see what happens here. And come through this clearing, and pretty good actually. Definitely not bad. There is an improvement there. I feel like it takes less effort to do this, and honestly get more aggressive. I feel like you know, the truck's planted, and give you a little more confidence whenever you're going down the road if you have to make a sweeping turn like that, or something similar. So now that we had our truck out on the test course, let's actually check the airbags out underneath of it. And here's what they are going to look like. And essentially these are just going to go kind of fill that void where the factory jounce bumper once was. And the thing with airbags is they're going to eliminate all this empty space here. So they're going to connect to the bottom of our frame rail and to the top of our axle housing, and essentially have a big cushion there. And what that's going to help do is keep everything leveled out, and give our factory suspension a little more reinforcement, you know. So the great thing with airbags is the fact that they're adjustable. These are adjustable from 5 up to 100 psi, so you really have a big range to work from. Generally speaking, you know, you really don't run them up too much higher than 40 or 50. Usually that's more than enough to get the job done, especially on a truck like this, but you know, at least you have it if you need it. With that said, one of the things that you have to think about whenever using an airbag is the fact that there is a little bit of maintenance involved. And one of the important things is to keep the minimum amount of air pressure in it. So you're always going to want at least 5 psi in the bags. If you don't do that, eventually your bags are going to get messed up, and you know, they could have some serious issues going on in the bag there, and then you go to use it, and because of neglect, you're going to have some issues and be bummed out. So keep the minimum air pressure in it. To make it really simple, you could use a compressor kit, and a lot, generally speaking, pretty much all the compressor kits are, especially the wireless type ones, are going to allow you to have a preset, and every time you hop in the truck, it'll make sure that bag is properly inflated to that minimum pressure. And not to mention, you can change your pressures on the fly too. So if you need to add some more when you're towing, you can do that. If you're someone that's really not too crazy about airbags, let's say you really don't need all that adjustability and you don't want to have to really deal with any of that, there is an option for you. You could go with a suspension enhancement like a Timberin, for example, and essentially those are big jounce bumpers and fill up this gap here. And with those, you know, they work really well, but you kind of get what you get. There is no adjustment, so that's kind of the trade-off there. But the positive spin to those is the fact that once they're in place, there is no maintenance. You're not going to have to worry about it at all. So I just want to do a side-by-side comparison of the airbag next to the factory John's bumper, and you can tell, I mean, they don't compare at all. This thing's essentially useless next to this. This is the 7500 series, and so these things are extra heavy duty, 7-inch diameter. I mean, these are bad to the bone. You know, if you really plan on using your truck, you can't go wrong with this setup here. With that said, one of the big questions that we do get asked a lot is if the airbags are going to work with goosenecks and fifth wheel hitches and things like that. And you know, I can't speak for every single one of them, but generally speaking, yes. And today we have a great example of that. We actually have a factory puck type system, and here, no interference at all. So, you know, I can say with certainty, if you have this system, the bags are going to work for sure. So when it comes down to it, these are going to be, you know, a good addition to an already awesome truck. Now, as far as the installation goes, it's not too bad. You know, I've done quite a few airbags on all different kinds of makes and models. Some of them are really hard, others are really easy. These fall somewhere in the middle. Everything's pretty straightforward, not too bad to work with. So as long as you take your time, it really shouldn't give you a whole lot of issues. Speaking of which, let's go ahead and put them on together now. To begin our installation, we're going to be underneath the back of our truck, and just to give us a lot more space to work and make it easier to see, I temporarily just lowered and removed our spare tire. It'll go back on whenever we're all done, but we're also going to get rid of this heat shield as well. Move this out of the way. And that's going to be held in place with two 13mm bolts, so they're going to be tucked up there. Get that one out, and this one. You can just lower this down and set it off to the side for now. So now what we can do is come over here to our John's bumper, which is this piece right here, and we need to remove it. So in order to do that, you can take a pry bar or a big screwdriver. You're just gonna pry in there and pop it out. If you look right here, we're going to have a bracket that's holding on some wiring and our brake line, and we need to get this out of the way for now. So I'm going to pull this bolt out using a 13mm socket. Once you have that out, we can kind of get it out of the way, and we're going to have a wire there. You can pop that out. And if you look right here, it's going to be a plastic piece, and we need to kind of squeeze on each side of it. And what we're trying to do is release this thicker bundle of wire from that bracket. So sometimes you can squeeze it with your fingers. That can be a little tricky. What I like to do is just take a pair of pliers and get it released that way. So you're going to squeeze in on the tabs. And push down. For whatever reason, if it starts trying to fight you a little bit, you can take a trim tool or a flathead screwdriver, get underneath it, and pry it out. But a lot of times you won't need to do that. Once you get those pinched in together, a lot of times you can just pull this right out. But with this out of the way, we can go ahead and start to focus on getting our airbags pre-assembled. So our airbag here, you're going to take it, and one side is going to have 3 holes on it, and this one here is where the air is going to come in and out of the bag. What you're going to do is take this plate, line that up, take the air fitting, and what you're going to do with this is get it started. Get as tight as you can by hand. Then we want to turn it, or tighten it rather, another 1.5 turns. So I'll start right there. So there's 1 turn. We'll go another 1/2 turn. That's all we need there. With that done, we'll then take our bracket. And these are side specific, so make sure you check the instructions to have the right one. see that's going to line up. Kind of rotate this here so we can see it better. That's going to line up the threaded holes in our airbag. And what you're going to do is take these bolts. See, they have kind of a tapered head on them. We're going to get these started. I like to get them both hand tight, kind of run them all the way down evenly. It'll kind of help draw this bracket in where it needs to go. And once we have them snug, we can come back with a torque wrench and tighten them down to the amount specified in the instructions. Anything that we do torque from here on out, you can find that spec in the instructions. And if you don't have a torque wrench, you can grab one here at eTrailer. Or a lot of times if you go to your local auto parts stores, they'll have one there available to rent. Now if we flip the bag over, we're going to have a couple holes there on the bottom side. Going to take roll plate, put that on. Then we're going to have this this bottom bracket, and you can see there's several holes there. You need to check the instructions and make sure you know what holes to use. What I do is kind of line everything up, figure it out, and then just put a couple marks there. That way I don't get them mixed up. With that said, this angled portion here, this bracket, needs to be on the same side as our air fitting side. If that makes sense. But pretty straightforward. Go ahead and line it up. I take those same type of bolts that we used a moment ago. Get these started. And essentially do the same thing that we did on the other side of this bag. Get them snug. And we'll come back and torque them down. And in case if you're wondering, the Allen key size that I'm using is a 7/32. With the suspension at full extension, we're going to take our Airbag Assembly and sneak this in. It might take a couple tries here figuring out which way is the best way to actually do this, because you don't have a ton of space. What we're trying to do is to get this portion of the bag up and over our strike plate. It's definitely tight, so just be patient. Might have to have a couple goes at it here to actually get it in, but there we go. So this is how we want it to sit, just like that. So if we push up on our airbag here, on the bottom of it, you see that there's some holes there in that factory piece of steel there. And you have some holes here in the bracket. What you want to do is make sure that those are lined up. So I'm just kind of holding it in place. Now I'm just going to take a marker, just kind of draw an outline around it. That way we can make sure we're close whenever everything's tightened down and whatnot. That way it's in the more or less the correct position, or at least in the ballpark. Now we can take this small bracket here and get this set up. These are side specific, so make sure you have the right one. You can see this wiring here, this plastic fitting that was kind of fighting me earlier, that's gonna get snapped into that bracket. And this is going to kind of nest on the lower bracket of our airbag assembly. This one, we can just plug that back into the factory brake deal there. And what's gonna happen is we're gonna take this carriage bolt, drop this on down through, and then we're gonna take one of these flange nuts. We're gonna put this on and run it up. Just get it finger tight for now. Over on this side of our airbag assembly, we're just gonna take the carriage bolt and just drop that down through like so. Now we can grab our axle strap bracket here, and this is gonna slide over those carriage bolts. Kind of get both of them going here. And again, each one is going to receive one of these flange nuts. So I'll just get these started hand tight. What you want to do now is make sure that this clamp bar is somewhat centered here between your shock mount and your leaf spring assembly there. So, you know, about the same on each side, close enough. And we'll grab a 9/16 socket, snug these up, and when you're doing these, you want to make sure to draw them down evenly. That way it pulls up nice and flat, or at least even. And once we have them snug, we'll come back with our torque wrench and get them completely tightened down. And then at this point, we can come back, and this nut up here that we left hand tight, we'll just snug that down. Use a 9/16 box wrench and get it just like that. Go ahead and re-secure this bracket, so with it lined up, and then we're going to take the included little bolt there, put on the flat washer. Once I get it started, come back with a 13mm and tighten it down. So now we can grab this hardware and get this going. So this end has kind of like an eyelet there, and what's going to happen is, let's say my hand is our frame rail. This is going to go through the hole in the bracket, and this is going to go around the frame rail. You're going to take this long bolt, put a washer on it, drop that down, and that's going to go through the upper bracket there on our spring. So this is a little tricky. It's going to be a little tricky to see, but hopefully you get the general idea. What's going to happen is you need to kind of work this piece in first and kind of hold it in a particular way, get over the frame, and then get this piece in and try to swing everything down at once. So if we work up here, we'll try to get this in. Over on the driver's side, we're going to have some wiring there, so make sure to go, you know, we don't want to get that pinched. That's what I'm going to try to do. That dropped on down. And it looks like I can probably get this at an angle here and come around to the outside of the frame rail and get our bolt through it. So you can see where that eyelet, I got it turned. Take that long bolt, drop it through. I'm gonna try to get these started here. Once we get them actually to come through, we're just gonna take a flange nut, get it started on each side. We're gonna have this U-bolt, and this one's a little tricky, I'm not gonna lie. What we're gonna do with it is come around from the back side, so we're gonna put it back through here. And if you remember where our Johns bumper was originally at, it was kind of in a cup. This U-bolt is gonna wrap around that cup, and we're gonna push it out of these two holes. So this is, you might have to take a pry bar or something and just kind of reposition everything to get it to line up, because it is really tight. I'm not gonna lie, I got kind of lucky there. Sometimes you might have to hit the back of the U-bolt with a hammer or something like that to get it to go through. But once you have both ends through, you can take those flange nuts and get them started. So with that hardware in place, we can tighten up these first. Again, you want to tighten these up evenly so it draws everything together. And we'll come back and get this U-bolt here. And once everything's tight, don't forget to come back with your torque wrench and get everything torqued out. Over here on the passenger side, we're going to repeat that exact same process to get this airbag installed. One exception here on the exhaust pipe, you're going to take the heat shield and put that on it, you know, close to the airbag. You want some distance there, but with that said, what I like to do is just kind of bend it and into the correct position. You're going to take the clamps, and I like to just get them loosely started on the exhaust pipe, and these are going to slide around our heat shield here. Hold it in place and start to get these tightened down. Try to reposition it a little bit, get it exactly where I want it here. So that's about good. We'll get them snug down. Now you can work on our airline tubing. So you'll get a big bundle of it, and each end will have one of these, you know, inflation valves pre-attached to it. And cut this in half, and I figured I'd just show you guys what it needs to look like. So you want the edge or the end of it to be really clean and straight. You don't want any burrs or anything on the end of it. So that's a good example of how it should look. So I'm using a pair of snips like this. It's got a razor edge. You can get a tubing cutter, even just a plain razor edge if you're careful. Set it on the table and cut it. You don't want to use a regular pair of snips, because when you do, it'll pinch it and it could develop a leak. So now that we have this cleanly cut, we'll go ahead, plug it into our airbag and get it ran. So with your clean cut line there, you're going to plug it into the fitting. These are push to connect quick fittings, so you're just going to take it, push it in, you'll feel it kind of seat, and just lightly pull back on it, make sure it don't pull out. You know, there will be some movement in there, and that's normal. As long as it don't come out, we're good to go. But I'll go ahead and get it ran and then show you what it looks like once I'm done. Here's how I routed the tubing. Just went right up, followed this factory bundle of wire. You want to avoid any hotter moving parts. Just ran it up along through here, where I have it, where it drops out here. Now that we've seen this one, let's check out the routing over on the passenger side of our truck. So on the passenger side, I got it plugged in, and before you plug it in, there's one thing you want to make sure and do. There's a thermal sleeve that they give you. Put that over the airline, helps keep it protected from the hot exhaust. With that said, pretty much the same path as the other side. Just routed up along through here, where it drops down here. And I actually cut this end off, and I'll explain that for a second. So imagine if this was still on. what you need to do is find a spot to mount these. So you can use some type of bracket where you connect to the hitch. A lot of people like to use the openings there for your license plate screws. That's a real popular one and one that I personally like. In our case, that's what we're going to do, but our customer doesn't want to have individual control of each bag. He would rather just fill up one nozzle and apply the same amount of pressure in each bag. So I cut this end off, and to do that, we're going to use a T-fitting. So I'll plug in the T here in that airline. This one, I'll come back and cut that off, get that plugged in. And then this end will go here. I'll put this through our license plate hole up there, and this will be the main fitting that will apply air pressure to each bag. So I went ahead and got that set up there. Here's how it turned out. Did it just like we talked about, and ran it through that screw hole where it goes into our license plate. So we see it under here. Let's go check it out, see how it turned out from the outside of our truck. And here's how it turned out here. So you're gonna, you know, put that through that opening, put on a rubber washer, and I have a flat washer and just a nut. And that's gonna keep the license plate secure and give us a great clean looking spot to air up the bags. Now what we need to do is fill our system up. That way we can check for leaks. So go ahead and take our air and put some in the bags. So now we have some air in the bags, we can check for leaks. And I do this a couple ways. I listen, as well as spray the fittings down with some soapy water. So what we're looking for when we spray this down, I like to just really get it really soak in there. And what we're looking for is for bubbles to rapidly be forming out of the fitting area. You're gonna have some bubbles just from spraying the soapy water on there, but if you see them constantly building and constantly coming out, you know that we have an issue. So a lot of times it'll happen where the airline gets plugged into the fitting. If that's the case, let the air out of the bags, pull the airline out, and to do that, you push in and kind of pull sharply out on it, recut that end to make it nice and clean, plug it back in, fill it back up, and check it again. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Air Lift LoadLifter 7500 XL air helper springs on our 2021 Chevrolet Silverado 3500.